War. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing, because we all know war is not great and we don't want to participate in it or be a part of it, though it's glorified by mainstream all the time. I remember as a teenager watching wartime films and thinking, oh, wouldn't it be great to be able to fly them fantastic aeroplanes and go and save our country from whatever, from the enemy. But now I have realised, that was just a very naive way of trying to be someone. It was my ego wanting to be a part of something and feeling, like the armies and the navies and all that kind of conglomerations try to make you feel that you're part of a team and that you're doing the right thing for your country and your fellow man and your fellow family. But is it what we want? Are armies and that going to war the right thing? Hmm. I know I used to really, well, I still am a big fan of the UN uh, commander. Well, I don't think that was UN secretary is what I mean, or Dag Hammarskjöld, and he helped set up the UN army. They were the ones in the blue army hats, but that was they weren't going to war. They were trying to help people. I don't know if it's still used like that these days, but they were usually sent in into difficult countries, and the UN army was made up from uh, soldiers from different countries. So it was a very mixed worldwide bunch trying to negotiate and bring peace and try to bring the warring factions together to some kind of understanding to come to a peaceful resolution. But what's Gurdjieff saying about war? Well, he says it's something that we do a lot. So I shall start with a quote from In Search of the Miraculous, actually. So we've got Ouspensky from page 103. How to stop wars. Wars cannot be stopped. War is the result of the slavery in which men live. Strictly speaking, men are not to blame for war. War is due to cosmic forces, to planetary influences. But in man there is no resistance whatever against these influences, and there cannot be any because men are slaves. If they were men and were capable of doing, they would be able to resist these influences and refrain from killing one another. So I know they're saying it's all part of the cosmic, is it evolution? And I'll do another quote in a minute about how he talks about how the two planets come close together, it sends down certain energies to our planet, which makes us start warring against each other. But as he says here, if we can have the right attitude and change ourselves to when them energies come towards us, then we won't be warring. I suppose it doesn't necessarily have to be a war of country against country, nation against nation. It could be a war inside yourself, or a war with your family, or a war with your friends. We've got to look at what this war is doing to us, whether we want to partake in it. So this is In Search of the Miraculous, page 23. Can war be stopped? Yes, it can. But the whole thing is how. It is necessary to know a great deal in order to understand that war is the result of planetary influences. Somewhere up there, 2 or 3 planets have approached too near to each other. Tension results. For them, it lasts perhaps a second or two. But here on Earth, people begin to slaughter each other, and they go on slaughtering maybe for several years. They are mere pawns in the game. All their movements, all their actions are the result of planetary influences. They themselves signify literally nothing. Then the moon plays a big part in this. Everything that happens on a big scale is governed from outside and is governed even by accidental combinations of influences or by general laws. And I find it quite interesting that in December of 2020, and I think it was on the solstice, 21st, December the 21st, that Jupiter and Saturn came the closest they've been together for a long, long time. And they could be seen from the sky, from Earth in the sky, coming together. I went out to look at it, but I was a few minutes too late, or maybe 40 minutes too late. So they began to part apart already. But I know some people sent me pictures of them close together. So it'd be interesting to see how that affects our planet since that's happened. And I have myself noticed that here in the UK, we are suddenly spending billions and trillions on making more nuclear warheads and things like that. We're upping our trident. So that's been decided in the last few months. But for something like that to be decided, it must have been discussed for a while. You know, I know other countries are kind of reassessing their armory and rebuilding or remaking weapons of destruction. Is it because of them 2 planets in December? Don't know. But because we haven't got people in charge that are rightly attuned or harmonious people who can know how to use these energies for our benefit rather than our destruction, we've got instead leaders that want to continue building their armies and prepare for war. And as I'm sure many of you know that I do follow politics and world changes, you know, the world is changing at the moment. 2020 brought in a big change, and the bigger countries that we're usually used to seem to be growing smaller in their power, and other countries are rising up in power. Change is coming. It definitely feels like it. It seems to be, we want it to be changed for the better, not for the worse. And when change comes, other countries don't like it, you know, and it could all end up being in a war. Do we want war? I don't think so myself. Instead, we need an awakening and people to find a better way of sorting out the resolutions and helping us all to live together on a more harmonious planet. So this is from All and Everything. From time to time, they, the free-brained beings, did something which was never done by free-brained beings on other planets. Namely, they would suddenly, without rhyme or reason, begin destroying one another's existence. And that's page 91. And I've actually recorded that. I think it was last year for Gurdjieff's birthday. Anyway, I had that section up, and it's from chapter 9, I believe, the Moon chapter, which is very interesting about why we go to war and how when we had our Kunda buffer removed, we still lived as if we had a Kunda buffer, looking for pleasure all the time. And maybe because we weren't getting that pleasure, we began to be a destructive tribe that wanted to, well, we took it out on each other and instead started warring with each other because we weren't getting what we want, probably, that pleasure factor. Carrying on, All and Everything, page 387. The results of the very saintly labours of Ashiata Shirmash were then also very definitely reflected in respect of that terrible peculiarity of the manifestation of the psyche of your favourites, namely in their irresistible urge for the periodic destruction of each other's existence. The process of reciprocal destruction established there, and issuing from that terrible particularity of their psyche, entirely ceased on the continent Asia, and only proceeded occasionally on those large and small parts of the surface of that planet which were far from the continent Asia. And this continued there only because, owing to their distance, the influence of the initiates and priests could not reach and be transubstantiated in the presence of the beings breeding on these parts of the surface of your planet. So we need, whether it's priest kings or learned people, to guide people, to show them we don't need to go to war, instead show them a better way of living so that we're not being in a warring factor. Instead, we're trying to live harmoniously. And if we could have the right kind of leaders that were aware of this, that are for the people and not for domination and about the nation as in a country and a name, rather than, we need people that would be here for the nation as a people, seeing the nation and caring for the people that it's supposed to be leading. And in olden days, there used to be these priest kings, because the priest kings came with a religious background. They were supposedly anointed by the divine, picked by the divine to be the leaders, and so that they would be taught in spiritual practices and understanding of what it is to be awake. You know, how to be a learned leader is someone who understands who people are, what they're leading, not an ego driven maniac, psychopath, or whatever, someone who wants to leave because it's a power rush. You know, these priest kings were trained to come from to give people the spiritual as well as the regal laws. You know, they're trying to keep their societies living harmoniously. Bring back the priest kings. So, page 1071 of All and Everything. Such an inherency, which had become fixed in their psyche during hundreds of centuries, can never be decrystallized in the course of a few decades. If they understood this, they would direct and use all their attention, all their powers, and all their possibilities, having only the beings of future generations in view. If instead of wiseacring with the aim of obtaining immediately a total cessation of these processes, they were to occupy themselves with the eradication of the conviction which has become fixed in their ordinary process of existence, of the virtue of two notions they have, that is to say, they were to try to attain the abolition of the practice of exalting certain of the participants in these processes to what are called heroes, and to award them with honours and orders, and also if they would try to attain the abolition of even one of their illustrious sciences, in which it is nonchalantly proves that the periodic reciprocal destruction on the earth is very, very necessary, and that if it did not exist, an intolerable overpopulation would result on the earth, and such economic horrors would ensue that human beings would begin to eat one another. Some people were saying that's what all 2020 is all about. You know, this overpopulation, there's too many of us. Well, the answer isn't to kill us all off. The answer is to educate us and to teach us how to live harmoniously, so that then we can become aware of what is the best way to all live on this planet together. People are programmed. I'm talking about people that aren't interested in these kinds of works, and then they go and have children with no consideration of the future. I'm not saying that people shouldn't have children. We still need the human race, but it's put on people to have children. I've never had children, and I've had people look at me as if I'm odd because I don't want children. I work with children. I love children. Children are great, but I don't need to bring my own into this world. I just decided that from a young age, and it's getting a bit personal here, but it wasn't just because of, overpopulation or anything. It was because I knew that I wanted to go on a different path. I didn't want to do what everybody else was doing. I kind of knew that there was something more to this world. And there's nothing wrong with having children. Those of you that have got children and are still following this path, that's fine. In the old Indian traditions, and I think it still continues now, men, for example, wouldn't go and follow their spiritual path till after they'd had their children and their families, and their children were young teenagers or young adults, so that they didn't need to be guided anymore. They would have given them a proper, thorough teaching of how to live and how to bring up their own families, and then their fathers could go off and join the gurus or go off on their own saintly pilgrimages to do their religious devotions, which is why they always did it later in life. And I know some other traditions do it like that. You have your family first and then send them off, hopefully balanced enough to become their own individuals, and then mother and father can go off and follow their own religious path. It's never too late. Do it anytime you like. But else, what I was going, oh yeah, heroes. Something that again is put on to people in this day and age, that our heroes are those that go to war and fight for us and save the country. But do we need to go to war? War, is it needed? Surely we can do some kind of dialogue instead. Why do people go to war? And it'd be interesting, or it is interesting myself, when we go and look into why people go to, why countries go to war, why they send people to war, and how they program their soldiers and their heroes to do what they want them to do. Remember, those that want to go to war aren't on the front line. They're in an office or a safe house somewhere directing the war. So I've done the Ouspensky ones. We've got one more Ouspensky, or a few more Ouspensky's. So page 143 of In Search of the Miraculous. Wars can be stopped. For this, it is only necessary that people should awaken. It seems a small thing. It is, however, the most difficult thing there can be, because this sleep is induced and maintained by the whole of surrounding life, by all surrounding conditions, which is why it takes so much effort, because we're breaking free of them conditions. We're breaking free of the astrological influences that are coming from the planets. And if we can be awake enough, we can instead change it around to be useful for us and our development and for the divine, which is what we're working for and working towards, helping with the divine's sorrow. But also on all this, we would see through all the programming, we would see through all what our leaders are telling us we must do and be. We would see the common sense of how to really live and the lunacy of what our leaders are telling us to do. So in Search for the Miraculous, page 299, Christianity forbids murder, yet all that the whole of our progress comes to is progress in the technique of murder and progress in warfare. So much money is spent on warfare, you know, which many of us know can be used on far better things. And I'm just going to remember Bill Hicks, the great comedian who I've mentioned before, as he said, soldiers are just hired killers, aren't they? Have a little ponder on that and go and listen to some Bill Hicks comedy. Page 310 of In Search of the Miraculous. 200 conscious people, if they existed and if they found it necessary and legitimate, can change the whole of life on the planet Earth. So true. And Ouspensky also said, an example of formatory thinking. Some people say that war is not necessary because all disputes and difficulties can be decided by conferences, negotiations, and things like that. If you formulate it like that and don't add that negotiation is possible only at certain periods and not always, if you think that it is always possible, then it is formatory and quite wrong. It is not always possible. A right principle can be made quite wrong by making it absolute, and formatory thinking makes everything absolute. And really, that's what most of our leaders and such like are using, formatory thinking. And we want to try and improve ourselves so that we're thinking with all our centres and in a harmonious way. So thank you to all of you for listening. Peace upon you all, peace to the world, and peace to every living creature on this planet and in the cosmos. Peace and out.